morning, good afternoon, or good evening. That depends on where you're joining us from. We'd like to thank you a lot for making the time for this session on localization and the Salmon's approach. We're very grateful that you joined and also quite excited about the conversation. We're just going to start with a few very simple housekeeping rules. But first of all, I'm Louise Thaler, Salmon's Response Planning Specialist at Impact Initiative, and also co-chairing the Global Shelter Cluster Urban Salmon Working Group. Today, there's quite a few of us online. It's about 100 people. So just to make sure we're going to have enough time to cover the material, just make sure that you share your questions on the chat and that you're muted throughout the event. Don't worry, we'll be collecting your questions and contributions along the way and address them at the end of the hour. If you are experiencing any problems with Zoom, please send a chat to Andrea Lopez from Interaction in the chat, and she will see how she can help you out. The session is being recorded, so you'll be able to share it with your colleagues who can't make it today. Yeah, I think we can move on to the next slide. Great. Well, we'd like to start with a small icebreaker. You've signed up for this session on the Salmon's approach and localization, and we hope you're going to find what you're looking for. As you know, this session is organized under the priority topic, localization of the HNPW. So we're going to be looking at how Salmon's approaches contribute to localization. And localization is, I'm sure, not a new topic for you, but today may be the first time that you hear about the Salmon's approach. So please take just a few seconds to take the survey that appears on your screen. You just need to go to www.menti.com and use the code to log in and just tick the option that fits you best. So the code is 99342438. We'll give it a few seconds. If you can go to the menti.com, www.menti.com, and use the code 99342438.
Hi, Luis. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's not. I think it's not updating the screen for some reason. So I'll drop the sharing and go back to it. So maybe I think it will show again when I reload. All right. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Let me know when that's ready on your end.
As usual, technical things. There you go.
There we go. Okay, so the majority of those who already answered are very familiar. That means hopefully we can get some additional contributions throughout the session. And there's also a few that are unfamiliar with the Salmon's approach. So we're going to try and cover not everything into detail, but the objective is really to give you a good overview of what the Salmon's approach means, not in theory this time, but in practice. So we can move to the next slide. Just recalling the main objectives of today's discussion. Great. So again, as we will see, the Salmon's approach is really a way to enable humanitarian actors to achieve better localization outcomes. And that is done by working more closely with local actors and in a very multi-sector manner. But before we go into that, I would like to welcome Brett Moore for introductory remarks from the Global Shelter Cluster. So please, Brett, can you let me know when you've unmuted yourself, and I will give you the floor.
Great. Thank you very much, Louise, for the introduction. Just give me a wave if you can hear me okay. I hope so.
Yeah, loud and
Okay,
clear.
very good. Louise, if it does break up, just feel free to butt in and I can try and get better reception. So welcome to everybody this afternoon. Thank you to the Urban Settlements Working Group and the colleagues from Interaction, Impact and CRS for hosting this event. It should be a very interesting event. We see from the poll so far that there's at least 30 people online that probably are not that familiar with this concept. So the next hour and a half will be very fruitful to understand. Just a little bit of background to where we're going to go with this and where it's come from. So the Urban Settlements Working Group is part of the Global Shelter Cluster. Maybe we can put the link in the chat there to the working group and to the cluster for those that are unfamiliar. So the Global Shelter Cluster really is there to support the coordination of all the humanitarian actors that respond in the context of emergencies in terms of shelter and settlement. The Urban Settlements Working Group in particular has been going since around 2017. We understood that there were particular issues that were
Brett, I think you're breaking up a little bit. We'll see if you can come back online.
needing to be fleshed out into. Okay, thanks, Louise. I'll just, I'll move and I'll continue speaking at the same time though. So as I was saying, the Urban Settlements Working Group is trying to support a series of improved interventions, particularly around urban areas. As we know, the humanitarian responses have urbanized greatly in the last few years. And so since around 2017, the Urban Settlements Working Group has produced a series of guidance, compendiums, case studies, including the most recent publication in December of 2020, so only really a few months ago. So I think we should be able to share that. Now, these resources are available for everyone to be able to understand better the approach and also link through to really improved outcomes at that local level. Just in terms of localization, as we all know, there's been increased efforts in the last few years across the whole humanitarian system for more targeted humanitarian response that gets better outcome for affected people and communities. Now, these system-wide efforts are trying to make things more accountable, of course, and putting communities central to decision-making roles on what kind of aid is provided and how it's provided, and really trying to get better quality outcomes. In the past, while the emphasis has mainly been really looking at increased participation and localization of financial flows, the work that will be discussed today is actually very critical, because we're really talking more around at the activity level, trying to create appropriate responses. So we're looking at context, we're looking at socioeconomic issues, and certainly very much around the built environment and environment more generally. Now, there are many factors, as we all know, that contribute to establishing and implementing quality projects. And it varies a lot from one place to another. Even across the vast humanitarian experience of all actors, there's still a lot of learning to do. So the three case studies that are being presented today from NRC, from Impact, and from CRS, from their experiences in Lebanon, the Central African Republic, and Nigeria, really will help map out and explain what are these local and contextually appropriate multi-sector responses that are getting good outcomes. And the colleagues will speak about the challenges as well in a very open way, so we can understand what's worked and try and keep progressing the sector toward a position of best practice and learning. Now, the final point on this, which I'd like to make really, is that the Global Shelter Cluster in the last few years has been very much supporting localization. We're receiving funding from BHA, who are represented here online today, and we're very thankful for their support in these particular efforts. The final point that I really want to make, though, is that when we're working at the local level, we really want to promote an understanding of how we can situate shelter and settlement responses as a bedrock humanitarian activity. We know that there is an existing and evolving body of humanitarian evidence that really points to these kinds of interventions as, when measured over 3 years, 5 years and later, as having really critical and important multi-sectoral outcomes: improved health, improved livelihoods, improved outcomes for children, improved environmental conditions, education, etc. So we want to create an understanding of how we place this kind of work at the centre of humanitarian interventions for better protection outcomes overall. We also know that really in the context of COVID-19, that's affected all of us, but very much specifically those people that we're working for, that is the affected communities. The quality of living conditions, density, access to services is a really big determinant on health outcomes. So we want to also increase the understanding of these particular impacts and outcomes of our work. So without further ado, I'll hand back to Louise and the colleagues, and I wish everyone a really interesting and fruitful discussion and some good learning outcomes by the end of it. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Brett, for these words, and that really sets the context and highlights the importance of the collective work we're doing. For those of you who are not so familiar with the work that the Urban Settlement Working Group has been doing over the past few years, and especially on the development of the concept of the settlements approach, I would just like to give the floor to Giulio, who is co-chairing the Urban Settlement Working Group and is also a shelter and settlement advisor at CRS. He will briefly introduce the concept and tell us a bit more about why localization is such an important principle in this approach. So Giulio, the floor is yours.
Hello, Louise. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. As Louise and Brett mentioned, this is work that has been ongoing for about 3 years, a little more. And now we've got to this point where we have the settlement approach, and we are stressing its relevance with localization. But I would like to start by defining a little bit more on what it is. It's a collection of tools and guidance that helps us build more meaningful and collective solutions in a settlement. And the idea behind it is that by bringing sectors, by bringing expertise, by bringing different representation from communities, we will be better placed to address the needs when a crisis happens. No? And as you can see on the diagram on the left side of your screen, it considers you can see that it considers a boundary, no, like to define where we are going to be working. Then it considers the whole population, meaning as you can see there, residents, migrants, but like host communities, the private, we can consider it as well, like private sector, but that's also like bringing multiple stakeholders together to the table, so we can make better decisions within the actions that we will take in that within that boundary. No, so when, as you will see during the session, the idea is that we analyze all of these factors, and we will be creating goals together, and we will be defining our settlement response plan. No, and that actually makes us closer to the affected populations and to the diversity of people that we will find. And I think, we have the pictures that you see on the right side are from some of those experiences in the field, where the community starts bringing their ideas to the table and voting on it and reflecting together, so each one can have their own role. And that's another thing that we consider very relevant in the settlements approach, is the concept of local leadership. And I think you will see it during the session. The result of the 3 years or more of work is the settlements approach guidance note that you can see here on the left. And it was published on December 2020, but it's not a document that was put together like that. It's a reflection, it's the conscious reflection of work in urban contexts and an analysis of the case studies that were published in 2018. That's a compendium of case studies about 30 different countries, about the same number of different stakeholders that were involved in the, in the contribution, and that's a sign that this is an important initiative that is encouraging to all of us to be intentional on integrating, on collaborating, and on coordinating to be able to serve better in the field as institutions, but also to engage more the affected population. And now I hand it back to Luis.
Thanks, Julio. We're going to welcome our panelists today. Just a small reminder about the settlements approach, what it is and what it's not. It's never the end goal. The settlements approach is basically a framework to deliver assistance in a more localized manner. So basically, different settlements-based programs might apply the same principles, but they will be inevitably going to lead to different outcomes. And that's what we're going to be seeing today with the panelists. So yeah, can you move to the next slide? Great. So I'm going to be welcoming Maha Ayubi, who is a shelter and settlement specialist at NRC Lebanon. She's leading on a brand new settlement-based urban program together with municipal actors and civil society. Then we're going to have Ugo Sima, who is country coordinator for impact initiatives in the Central African Republic. He is coordinating a research, planning, and capacity building program that focuses on 20 towns in the southeast region of the country. And finally, we're going to have Nancy Doran, who is a shelter, settlement, and wash manager with Sierras Nigeria. She is leading on a large-scale integrated program in northeast Nigeria that strengthens community assets in quite a few key humanitarian sectors. So to start with, I'm going to welcome Maha for a short introduction about her program in Lebanon. Maha, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Louise. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to go through, as Louise has mentioned, the NRC vision towards the pathway to localization through implementing through settlements-based approach. So in 2020, NRC Lebanon, in line with the NRC Global Shelter and Settlement Strategy, adopted the settlements approach as the main model for the implementation of its country programs. At the core of this decision was the pursuit to ensure the sustainability of what we do in Lebanon. And that was driven by the need and the efficacy of the shift towards local development approaches in a country, which is Lebanon, which is facing continuous challenges in its central governance and the capacity of its state to ensure access to public services to its residents. So I will therefore present the vision of localization, again, according to NRC Lebanon, and how this transition and its objectives are defined according to us. Starting with that first slide, looking at sectoral interventions at individual household level. So for years, we have implemented our program across the country through this type of sectoral interventions. Now, of course, there will always be a need for specialized sectoral interventions to respond to particular needs of individuals. However, the long-standing or the long-standing implementation of solely the sectoral interventions has meant that our data on vulnerabilities remain at household level, and which that limits the ability to draw trends of underlying vulnerability at a community level, and it restricts the understanding of systematic barriers or cross-cutting issues such as gender, age, and environment. So relying on this type of interventions limit our capacity in investing in local capacities and does not invite to a meaningful engagement with the communities, including vulnerable non-displaced populations. As you can tell as well, municipalities remain marginal and are largely only informed about the interventions, playing no role in the decision-making or nearly no role in that decision-making. And since the collaboration, the interaction is rather restricted at a consultation level and is only to provide sometimes access of international NGOs into these localities. At the same time, we can see that there's an exclusion of CBOs, of local NGOs and local committees. The next slide, please. So is the answer to localization achieved through the mere delegation to local NGOs? While working with local NGOs does provide an opportunity to employ local capacities and benefit from local knowledge, in addition to contributing to local resilience and enhancing accessibility, it does not necessarily empower effective local coordination structures, and keeps the municipality as well excluded from decision making or planning, and it does not inherently invite the engagement of CBOs and local committees. To the next slide, please. So NRC Lebanon believes that the establishment of a pathway to localization begins by ensuring that we count with the proper context for a local dialogue around the services we provide to people affected by displacement. And this process actually takes place in two phases. In the first phase, as you can see here, NRC is the lead of implementing the settlements approach, bringing several stakeholders to a circle of consultations. The municipality here plays a central role in this through leading the local coordination among these several actors, collecting inputs from them, and hence taking a collaborative approach in the decision-making process. These actors are usually local as well and could include, among other examples, community-based organization, women association, religious institutions, refugee committees, neighborhood committees, etc. So this ensures that the municipality has access to diverse perspectives over the needs in the community and that it is encouraged to become more knowledgeable of them. On a wider scale, technical and administrative inputs are always needed from regional and national institutions, but without undermining the local discussion that is taking place around the municipality. So these regional or national institutions play important role in the delivery of public services, and we can mention, for example, water establishment and the Électricité du Liban as examples, in addition to unions of municipality and the regional sectoral working groups. Can we move to the next slide, please? All right, so when NRC project timeframe comes to an end, and the municipality therefore becomes the lead of the local response. And around the municipality, the actors who either represent the various social groups in the community, such as the ones presented on the slide and mentioned earlier, like youth committees, refugee committees, or other actors that have interest in responding to the needs in the community set, such as international NGOs, local or national NGOs, they continue to engage in a diversified and participative planning, implementation, and monitoring. and linkages with regional and national institutions continues to take place as well. So here we see that this is the second phase where the international NGOs stop leading the processes, and that responsibility is given to the local actors and principals. But this transition, however, does not happen automatically, and it does not happen by default. And it can be impeded by several factors and things that are contextual to the places where we work with. And these factors have in fact informed our selection of the municipalities with whom we believe that this type of democratized response at local level is possible. So one of the factors, for example, in Lebanon, that could impede an effective transition towards that type of localization is the presence of prominent political influence or interference in the communities, which disrupts access to sensitive data or leads to the exclusion or the undermining of the participation of particular representative groups in the decision-making process. So this disruption could not only impede an effective localization, it might also mean that the implementation of a settlements-based approach is questionable, and that actors gradually start reverting back to the initial sectoral intervention in order to avoid all of this loss of institutional investment. So this experience has taught us that the collaboration with municipalities is a mutual benefit in addressing the constraints that we each face in our engagement in responding to local needs. And similarly, that setting collaborative and essential roles for the different stakeholders, including local NGOs and CBOs, is as important for ensuring a long-term impact of the settlements-based approach in making localization possible. Over from my side.
Thanks a lot, Maha, for this overview and also for explaining so clearly how you really built your program on the principles of the settlements approach. That's pretty much what you will read in the guidance notes. So it's great to see those put into practice. I have just a follow-up question for you before we move on with Ugo. Is about how NRC, why and how NRC decided to implement a settlement-based program specifically in Lebanon. So are there, in your opinion, any precondition that need to be met in a given context to make sure that the settlements approach is going to lead to a meaningful response?
Sure, there are several. So as I've mentioned, things do not happen automatically, and you need to ensure that you're setting your program up for success. So some of the perhaps ingredients that we need to ensure for the success of a settlements approach is, in addition to the point that I addressed in the presentation, is that you're operating in a context that is relatively stable, and that the vulnerable groups are not excluded in a sense that any representation of these vulnerable groups could initiate social tension and could therefore be creating harm or instability within the community. In addition to that, again, looking at the municipality as a very central actor there, the local authorities, like the municipality, needs to be financially and administratively capable and willing to partner in the implementation of settlements-based approach, or else you're just putting a lot of effort to bring the pieces together, but you'll be facing more challenges or restrictions to the capacity of implementing that approach than you're actually doing something towards it.
Well, thanks a lot, Maha, and I'm sure Ugo's and Nancy's presentation will also, speak to yours. So I'm going to now welcome Ugo, calling from the Central African Republic. So Ugo, I've already introduced you, so feel free to go ahead. Ugo, if you're trying to speak, we are not hearing you at the moment. Okay, if you are facing any technical issue, Ugo, from car, we may move on then with Nancy and see if the technical connectivity issue can be solved in the next 10 minutes. So Nancy, I can welcome you on board and then we can move on to your presentation right away. So yeah, Tulio, you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone from sunny and warm Northeast Nigeria. Let's see, I'm just waiting for Tulio to catch up with my slides. Just ahead of that, just forewarn, my connection here is not so good. So please text me if all of a sudden you're not hearing me. I might not know for about 30 seconds.
Sure, we will.
Okay, thank you. So just waiting on the slide. Well, I'll just start. Again, my name is Nancy Duran. I am the CRS Shelter and Wash Manager in Northeast Nigeria. Thank you for allowing me to share some of the work we're doing on the settlement approach. So I have about, next slide, Tulio. I have about 5 minutes. I'm going to go through it really quickly. I'm going to zoom out really large and then come back in. So it's, fasten your seatbelts. I'm going to try to do it as clearly as possible. Wanted to start, since we're talking about settlements approach and localization, wanted to start with context. Nigeria is the 7th most populous country in the world, and it's experiencing, Tulio, previous slide. Tulio, can you hear me? So I'll just continue. The slide that we should be looking at, yes, there's Nigeria, or Northeast Nigeria, and some images of it. By the end of the century, it's expected to be the 3rd most populous country in the world. So it's a huge global player. Currently, it's experiencing exponential growth in population, combined with increased climate change. So it's right on the Sahel region where it's experiencing a lot of droughts and then a lot of flooding. One of the largest lakes is in that adjoining area. You see the light blue on the map. 40 years ago, it was the 6th largest lake in the world. Now, over the last 40 years, it lost about 90% of its surface area. So Northeast Nigeria, where we're working, is the hardest hit by these factors, and it's experiencing one of the greatest humanitarian crises in the world. This includes significant human, environmental, and economic stressors, which in turn has triggered high levels of violent conflicts, ethnic clashes, and communal disputes. The numbers on the table will show you 8.7 million people today, as of the latest OCHA numbers, are in need of humanitarian assistance. 1.7 of those are IDPs. This is going to continue based on science, and the social environmental stressors will continually increase. The IDP number is expected to double in the next 30 years. So next slide, please. Next slide. So this is the challenge. How do we respond to the immediate life-saving needs while recognizing and implementing programs that address this protracted emergency over the next 30 years? So CRS, we've been engaged in this region since 2016. So we've been there for a while through this protracted emergency. We utilize and implement a multi-sectorial settlements approach through shelter, wash, food security, nutrition, and agriculture. It definitely changes as the needs slightly change each year. Our entry point for the settlement approach is the community. Community is at the core of everything. So we start with the recognition and the strengthening of the existing local assets, the human assets. the physical assets. Next slide, please. An important component of our settlement approach is our partner capacity strengthening strategies to promote community-led solutions and resilience. Resilience is the name of the game. Providing trainings and technical accompaniment for local institutions. So for implementation of reaching 69,000 people over the last 12 months, we're needing to get in and understand and work with over 30 communities. To do this, we partner with 2 local NGOs, JDPC and WAVE, and they in turn are hiring many community workers for our program. It's over 60 individuals. When these partnerships began a few years ago, CRS had a much bigger role in a lot of the work we were doing, and we were doing a lot of the implementation. But over the years, we've accompanied our local partners with operational and programming support, and today now they are doing most of the work. We are sort of a skeletal crew, just providing some accompaniment and some technical support as the needs arise. We also are really excited about our support and engagement of the private sector. As an example, the current practice for water provision of those in need in the area is to rehabilitate public water points. However, we've identified through community-based assessments that a large section of IDPs and host communities are fulfilling their water needs through the private water market. So to leverage that, CRS has developed a model to work in supporting local water vendors through business model improvement and information on supply material inputs as well. But after about a month period, they are on their own, completing their business, and we're just coming in and monitoring. Next slide. Yes, thanks, Tulio. I wanted to just touch really quickly. So we started big and then we're going down to the household. I wanted to show you how the settlement approach affects the family. So this is Fanmi, and in 2018, her village was attacked twice by AOGs, armed opposition groups, and they had to flee their house and their village. They lost all of their possessions and their house and ended up in an informal IDP camp on the outskirts of Maiduguri, which is the Borno state capital. So they were there, informal settlement, no shelter, no basic services. CRS and local partners came in and we engaged community stakeholders to develop a community-led plan. As an outcome of this process, we were able to facilitate the setting up of local community-based committees and form them and train and so that they could manage the key basic service provision in terms of sanitation, water, disaster risk reduction. Another really key aspect of the settlement approach for us was that we actually have a legal expert on our team for housing, land, and property. So her community and herself were able to access legal support for the negotiation of land use with property owners, and also to resolve any kind of conflicts that arise from that. In terms of construction, because some of the outcomes also involve the construction of latrines, housing, water points, basic infrastructure. We do that through local contractors, but we do provide a lot of technical support and monitoring of those construction projects. Finally, Fanmi and also her community around here are supported by those partner community mobilizers, actors that at a few different points are able to come in and talk to her about her own specific family needs and best practices for hygiene. So finally, last slide, I'm going to take sort of the large scale and the small scale together. So on the left is a diagram of all the stakeholders that are put into place. You don't need to read it, just look at it as a diagram that's kind of complicated and shows you all the actors that are involved in the provision of basic services in Nigeria. It kind of shows the flow through planning, assessment, and implementation of these things. And it's kind of complicated, right? But they're there to make sure that FANMI, who's on the right, can actually access these basic services. What we find with the most vulnerable is that this is a very top-down approach. So I guess what I want to leave you with is it's very interesting that when we're able to take FANMI, her local context and her local settlement systems, including that private sector water market vendor, and actually plug them into the system and reinforce the sort of bottom-up approach, allowing that top-down as well. You need both. So thank you all. I hope I'll be around for any questions. This is really exciting for me to be able to share with you.
Well, thanks, Nancy. Well, it's been exciting for us to hear. Well, what I take away from our presentation is the way you've managed to connect the bottom-up and top-down approach all together in quite a large-scale emergency program. That's quite impressive. So from what I understand, like this program was not designed as a settlement-based thing from the get-go, but you really put emphasis on how the program relies on local resource and communities, and that links us back to key principles from the settlements approach. And your program that's been running for 4 years now, I'm wondering how you see it developing, maybe in a second phase, maybe going deeper into local recovery or post-crisis assistance. Like, having worked on emergency programming in these communities for such a long time, does scaling it up to an even larger or more comprehensive settlement-based program sounds feasible now? Did you hear me correctly, Nancy, or am I breaking up?
I'm sorry, you faded out. I was not able to get the final question.
No worry, that was about how you see this program developing into a larger settlement-based program. Thank you to those who typed the question in the chat.
I'm sorry.
Well, no worries. We can get back to that question later. I'm just conscious about time, so we might want to get back to Ugo, who managed to get back online. So Tulio, if you could just go back to Ugo's slides so we can hear his presentation from CAR.
Yes, thank you, Louisa. I hope you can all hear me well. Once again, yes, apologies if there's some internet issues. Normally they are resolved after a few seconds to give this presentation, and also alongside really great colleagues working in other context. So the project that we want is a big project that's being implemented by several organizations, but especially relevant for this approach, assessments that are conducted by Impact, and especially through the Agora initiative at the service of local communities and actors. So if we can go to the first slide. Thank you. The project. So basically, what is this project? It is a multi-organization, multi-settlement consortium that is funded by the European Fiduciary Fund in CAR, which is called BECU. It's comprising of 6 organizations, and it's led by ACTED, with which actually the Agora initiative is a joint initiative. Sorry, apparently it's going to be better if I cut my camera. I'm sorry about that. But so it's the Agora initiative is a joint initiative between ACTED, which is the lead of this consortium, and Impact Initiatives. And we're also working with COPI, with Oxfam, with Concern Worldwide, and with Free Press United. And this is a slightly different organization working with information and communication tools and community radios. And especially through this project, working with a Central African Republic counterpart, which is called the RMCC, the Réseau des médias communautaires centrafricains. So this project, as you can see, is very expensive and very ambitious, and it has been quite challenging, but also very enriching for our teams, as we're targeting 21 localities throughout the southeast of CAR. This project is lasting for 2.5 years. At the start of the project, we'll see how it evolves. But yes, so as we were talking about, there's a lot of challenges in the implementation of those settlement-based approaches, assessments, and also responses, but mainly also, linked to the context in CAR, which is incredibly complex. Of course, I think you're all aware that a lot of humanitarian actors and development and any actors really have been delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And also we had to face several security challenges in the Central African Republic. So this has, meant that this project was incredibly complex to implement from the start. But we're very happy about the work that we've achieved so far, and especially to consider that this project was really based on a settlement-based approach and mindset, because the Agora initiative and all the settlement-based assessments that we're conducting were kind of labeled in the project development as the results zero. So really the kind of kickoff research that would inform the action of the partners. So how does it work is that all the other partners have different localities that are divided, and within each locality, one partner will implement a package of intervention, always having in mind this idea of settlement-based approach, including all the local community, and looking at the needs and what has to be done in a holistical way. So yeah, we can go to the second slide. So the main activity that we have in this initial activity is the development of local recovery plans. So those are settlement-based multi-sector assessments. And so maybe some of you are know about the Agora initiative, but maybe some others know us better with the REACH initiative, where we also implement a lot of assessments and multi-sector assessments. So the main difference is that while with our other assessments, we're looking at the crisis level and we're really trying to support the coordination and planification of humanitarian action at a very macro level. In this kind of assessments, we're doing a deep dive at the community and the settlement level. So it will entail a multi-sector approach in the assessment, looking at all the sectors that you can think of, and looking at it through key informant surveys, and also focus group discussions. And so those focus group discussions are also including participatory mapping of basic services, so that we can also get the best feedback from the settlement actors on the location of the basic services, their functionality, and everything else. There's also a very interesting contextual part in this settlement-based assessments. So we have a thorough analysis of the local context of the settlement, about the history, socioeconomic environment, conflict analysis, because of course, in the CAR complex context, it is something that has to be understood in order to implement a settlement-based approach. Also the economic environment and doing an analysis of all the economic branches that are present in the settlement. And then finally, a mapping of all the actors, be they political, local authorities, civil society organizations, where we're also, for the CSOs, we're also using a tool developed by Oxfam, one of our partners, that's called Taking the Lead, and also looking at other type of actors, being grassroots organizations, economic groupments, and of course the NGOs and international NGOs that are also present. So this is the first step of the assessment, which is very much the research part, the initial research part, and that we call the territorial diagnosis. This also, so when we try to go further and to really delve into the settlement-based approach, and especially into the localization aspects, is during the second step that we have, which is the recovery planning. So during the second phase, after we carry out the analysis, we go back to the community, to the settlement, and we do several workshops. So the first one that we do is a local planning workshop at the settlement level, where we're able to look at the findings with the settlement actors, agree on what has been analyzed, and also choose the action plan and the priorities for the settlement. So this is, for example, what you can see in the diagram below. So what is really interesting is that this is developed with the settlement actors during the workshops. And what is interesting is that the prioritization is coming from the settlement actors. So at the same time, if you take one sector, if you can see, for example, the health sector, the first one, you can do an intra-sector prioritization. So based on the analysis and based on the feedback from the settlement actors at the workshop, you can see that for this example, in one settlement, the first priority was to reinforce the capacities of health personnel. And the second priority was to rehabilitate the health infrastructure. But then what you can also do is the inter-sector prioritization, so that overall, when the local actors or NGO actors that are going in the settlement want to implement a program that is deemed as the most priority sector for the settlement actors, they can see that from the local workshop, the settlement actors have decided to put the priority number 1 on the health sector, priority number 2 on the education sector, and priority number 3 on the business, small business sector. So this allows the settlement actors to decide for themselves what should be the priority interventions in each of the settlements. So then that's the local planning workshop at the settlement level. We also have, because our work is organized across different prefectures, which is the admin 1 level after the state in the country. So we also have, when we have covered the analysis and the local planning workshops in all the settlements that we're targeting in one prefecture, we also have an overall prefectural workshop, also to validate all those findings, but also to get additional feedback from the local actors that are participating in these workshops. And this is especially interesting to be able to understand how those priorities can be put into actions, and also to get some very interesting information for afterwards the second activity that we'll have, which is the follow-up of those local recovery plans and how we can best help the local community to advocate for actors coming into their settlements and do all those activities. So this is the second part of the recovery planning, and then we merge all this into one report, which is the local recovery plan, that we make widely available to all the local actors, but also because of the work that we do, is very transparent and publicly available. So we publish it. We also give it to, at the national level, the national authorities, especially working, for example, with the Ministry of Local Administration and Decentralization, also at the humanitarian coordination platforms. So we wanted to keep it to this slide, but we also have some other future activities that are very much, I think, feeding into this settlement-based approach and localization. So the 3 activities, the first one is as I was saying, the follow-up of those local recovery plans. So the plan is to establish committees or to reinvigorate or work with existing committees at the settlement level, so that we can make sure that we're not doing those local recovery plans just as a nice report and then we just forget about it. The key element of this research is to ensure that there's a sustainability that is created with the local actors, and that they can use those local recovery plans to make their decisions, and also to advocate for their communities. We think it's especially important because of two very practical elements. So, for example, one quote from a local authority in Bangassou, this local authority said, the NGOs are coming and going, the projects are implementing and finished, but we stay in the settlements. As a consequence, it's up to us to follow up on the follow-up and the coherence between the different projects, but we can only do that if we are well informed by the NGOs. So this is really important in terms of coherence and relevance to the local settlement and sustainability. Then we'll also have another activity of capacity building of local authorities and local actors, where we're also going to put a big focus on local relevance and sustainability. And then the last activity that is a bit different, that is a South-South exchange, building on the experience of impact initiatives in other contexts. We want to put it in relation some key actors of this project with another similar project that we have with colleagues in Niger. That's called Shimodu, and that's being implemented in the southeast of the country, which has like several similarities, be it on the geographical element or the political or conflictual elements. And then, so what I think it echoes what has been said before, is that we only want to be the facilitator of local information sharing and knowledge sharing between actors in the global south. So yes, this is scheduled to happen between the end of 2021 and early 2022, and we'll be very happy to come back maybe next year to talk about the results. Thank you.
Thanks, Sogo. Thank you so much for this overview. I had a few questions to ask you, but we're unfortunately running out of time. So we're going to move on and open the mic or open the floor to questions from the participants in a short while. So I hope everything I wanted to ask you will be raised by someone else, because that was really interesting. So Utulia, could you move on to the next slide, please? So in the meantime, yeah, so that's just a quick wrap up from everything that was said today. So we heard Maha telling us about the settlement-based approach that really puts the end goal around fostering municipal coordination and allowing also hidden actors and vulnerable groups to be fully part of the process. Then Nancy told us about ways to strengthen local assets and really build household ownership around a program that was truly multi-sectoral. And then Hugo told us about the importance and relevance of doing joint participatory planning with local actors so they can take ownership of the data and create the plans for themselves, followed by a strong capacity building program. So that, you know, what everything has in common is basically this strong focus on localization. So that's very much the topic of today's discussion. And like there's various ways to achieve localization outcomes for sure. But there are two things that seem to stand out from the three presentations we've been hearing and that we can also find in the literature about localizations. These are the importance of building partnerships with local actors and also the importance of investing in capacity building. So as you participants contribute and, you know, type your questions in the chat, and as we collect all of those questions, I would just want to give the floor to our panelists today to tell us a bit more about how they've been conceiving their partnerships with local actors. What are the best practices when it comes to partnering with local actors? and also how it's important to invest in capacity building to bring changes at the local level. So we'll just take 5 minutes. If there's anyone, Maha, Ugo, or Nancy, who wants to tell us a bit more about capacity building or partnerships, and that will give us a bit of time to collect all of your questions, and we'll get back to that right after. So yeah, just 5 minutes. I give the floor to any panelist.
I'll take over the mic real fast. I'm going to keep my video off for maybe just a second because I think the internet's pretty bad here. I'll take a lesson from Ugo. Just in terms of partnerships, and I think this starts dealing with the settlement approach and also development and what essentially is a settlement. A settlement is a collection of people that come together because they share an interconnectedness of culture, economy, and resources, how they make a living, all of these things, the water, systems like that. That's when they become a community, and that's when they become a settlement. So our partnerships really need to be localized because all the strengthening, capacity strengthening that we're doing and all the investment we're doing, if it's already inherently part of that interconnectedness, it just makes it stronger and it makes it more of a settlement. So I think that's really key for us in terms of making sure that partnerships are not just partnerships willy-nilly, but that they really are invested and an essential part of the community. So just my 2 cents there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I want to now turn the mic to maybe Maha, who had a really good point about building intentional partnerships that are reciprocal between local actors and the international NGOs coming in to support them. So Maha, if you want to take 30 seconds to elaborate a little bit on these before we share participants' questions, you're most welcome.
Yes, thank you. Again, I would like to start from the point that you reiterated on, which is the intentionality of partnering with local actors. I guess the turning point between settlements-based approach and the more vertical engagement that takes place in more of the sectoral interventions is the acknowledgement that the more you engage with people who are active at the local level, the more you are able to comprehend and understand the different interlinked vulnerabilities at the community level, and the more you're able to estimate and tap into the local capacities. Doing so means that you're able to pinpoint the root causes of the challenges that are causing vulnerability at the community level, and 2 is that you're actually setting the proper structures so that whenever your project time frame has come to an end, that you know that there are other actors who can build on and continue doing or continue engaging in the way that you have said to be collaborative and intentional. Over.
Thanks, Maha. There's a lot of questions coming from the chat, so I will let Andrea just share her screen so everyone can have an overview of, what are the main concerns and main contributions. And, if someone from the audience would like to bring a specific point, please just tell us in the chat. Thanks. So here are the questions that's just loading. So there's a first question that is for Tullio. Tullio, how do you actually bring on board the huge diversity of expertise that's necessary to do integrated and localized approach? So that It can be sometimes hard to sell to donors. That's something maybe you wanna react on. How do you do that?
Yes. So first of all, I think Brett mentioned it. The BHA, OFDA and BHA now have been very supportive of this initiative. So it could be considered hard to sell, but there's already some donor support to these initiatives, no? And I think there's a similar trend with the ECHO, with the European Union. So I agree the challenge is to make it more coherent sometimes when we are in an emergency response where there's so many unknowns, no? But one of the examples, or no, let's say the examples of Nancy in Nigeria, you can see that there can be one sector driving the start of the process, and then other sectors and other expertise come in, and integrate to give a better and more comprehensive solution. And the other example from Maha is when you have not only one sector, but let's say one agency or one municipality who can take the lead, and then it brings, you integrate into that drive, and that's something that we reflect on the guidance note, that this is an iterative process. So you have to consider that, it's a work in progress. You assess a settlement, you assess the community, and needs can change. Solutions can also change in time. So when you say that it's a challenge, I think it is challenging, but that's where we are here. That's where we are working on, being intentional about this change. So on your question of specific on donor support, I think there's a trend to be supportive and bringing people together. There's multiple ways, and I think yes, it is challenging, but the case studies that are explored before the guidance and now in the guidance, you will see that it can be done.
Yeah, true. There's an increasing body of evidence coming from the humanitarian sector demonstrating the potential of such integrated and localized approaches. So we hope events and sessions like this one can also contribute to encouraging more agencies to push this agenda for their donors to support. But more feedback on that can be really helpful to colleague. Then
the leadership, Luis, plays a big role. Who is leading that process and how open they are and how intentional they are about bringing others. So yeah.
A shared leadership, as the presentations have demonstrated. How about turning now to Nancy? There's a question for you about how you measure the success in partner capacity strengthening. Do you have any specific set of indicators that allow you to gauge the success of this approach and maybe improve the capacity building over time?
Yes, we do. We do have tools in place. We also have people in place to monitor that. And so how do we measure it? We actually have to have a baseline. And so CRS does have departments and systems in place to do that baseline. We've got some really nice tools for that before starting up the partnership, but that is made with the partner. There's a lot of in-house accompaniment with that's throughout the period of the partnership, that you go in and you're monitoring progress as it's ongoing. And then as you are doing yearly reviews, there's an opportunity to take a higher level look and see what worked in the past year, where do we need to go in the future. How do you know if you had a success? Well, first, that you start seeing higher amount of resiliency and the ability to take on tasks that you used to do as a prime. The ultimate goal, especially for CRS and identifying a success, measuring success, is that the local partner then becomes the prime. So that's where, in the big picture, we measure success in partner capacity strengthening.
Well, thank you, Nancy. I think that the following question might be also interesting for you, or for Maha, or from anyone else from the global shelter cluster. It's about housing, land, and property issues. So how are settlement-based approaches addressing housing, land, and property issues in a locally negotiated manner? So feel free to contribute to that if you've got specific experiences with HLP issues in your settlement-based programs.
I will go really fast because I'm really excited about our HLP. Sometimes it gets lost a little bit, and to start with, it is part of the protection sector. So in terms of community-based, settlement-based approaches, HLP actually offers us a nice entry point in terms of ensuring that there's equitable distribution of resources, as well as that integration of gender and protection issues. And also well noted in this question, it's key to set that up and have an understanding of that before you can actually make any kind of housing or infrastructure or sanitation solutions. So thank you. Over to you, Hugo.
Thank you. Yeah, the next question is for Hugo. It's about, sorry, it's about
enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
I think we've got someone who's not muted. Can you please make sure you're muted? So yeah, so we don't have any background noise.
Enter your participant ID followed by pound.
It's Francis.
You are in the meeting now. There are more than 80 participants in the meeting.
Is it back? Is it back to normal? It sounds like it's back to normal. Apologies for this technical issues. So yeah, the next question is for Hugo. It's about who are the stakeholders you've involved in the local planning workshop at the settlement level? How do you do with identifying them? And there's also another question in the chat for you, Hugo, if you want to address both at the same time. Is about how you monitor the settlement plans that have been made with multiple actors after the international organization has finished the program. So over to you, Hugo, for these two questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So I tried with the camera on again, but let me know if it's not a good idea or if it's not working. But for the first question, so really, I think it all comes down in the settlements that we are visiting and assessing to the local actor mapping. So we really want to bring a maximum array of people and local actors. So they can be really from the local authorities, so really the mayors, actors from the sub-prefecture, from the prefecture in some settlements. It can be civil society organizations. It can, of course, be members of the NGOs, national NGOs or international NGOs that are present in the settlement. It can also be economic groupment representatives, because that's also a really strong component that we want to ensure in all the local recovery planning. We know that that's, of course, the economic branches. If you wouldn't have anyone from an economic groupment, such as agriculture or fishery or small business or something like this, then we don't think that this local recovery planning could. Yes, sure, I can. Or can I? Yes, actors. And what we've seen, and also city building that was before, is that really it is the inclusion of such a different arrays of stakeholders that is able to enrich the local recovery planning. And also what we're seeing is that and through the feedback from the participants to the local planning workshops, is that those people that are in the settlements, they have ideas and they have solutions. And that is also why it is so crucial to ensure this localization and this capacity building, because when talking to some actors, they do tell us that they have ideas, they have proposed solutions, but also because of their vulnerability or because of their lack of engagement from previous actors, they don't feel like they have the space, or they don't feel like they have the legitimacy to propose priorities for their settlements. So we think that's also a really important aspect, to not only include participants and local actors from settlements in focus group discussions, accountability to affected populations and to local actors, but also ensure that we build their capacity so that those local actors can be the main actors having the agency.
Thanks so much, Ugo. So there is another question for you, but maybe we can start with the last one, question number 2, to see if Nancy or Maha can talk a bit more about the notion of inclusiveness of diverse ethnic and religious group in the process, knowing that you've been working in areas that are that can be pretty sensitive in terms of social cohesion and stabilization. How can the settlements approach and including diverse ethnic group contribute to peace building process in the places where you're working?
Really good question. It's something that we're confronting and asking ourselves internally and externally with the community every day. Sometimes the question comes up because of an issue that comes back to us from the field. Sometimes hopefully we're a little bit ahead of that. So we did already talk about the HLP, and we definitely we do have a lawyer on the team, and he's an expert in HLP, but he also has a lot of experience with conflict resolution. And we find that especially when you've got such a rise in population for so few resources, that these natural resources become a point of contention and conflict that has been leading to a lot of these armed conflicts. So that HLP is really a great opportunity for providing that. There is a lot of marginalization from women into the decision-making roles in local communities. And this is something, I definitely would come in respecting all different systems. But there is a point where we can facilitate the opportunity to have discussions about property rights, and where that gender equity can potentially, move forward. So that has been a really delicate point of entry for us, but a really important one, because it then also ties into a lot of the other implementations we need to do. I think just a point, we come up with a water issue recently. We've identified that there's some communities culturally that they will refuse certain water treatment of public water points. And so we are developing a methodology with some of the community members to create a large network of different community water management committees, so that different communities can come together and understand each other's needs, but then also share lessons learned. One community that has accepted certain practices of water treatment can talk and inform and become an influencer for another community. But we also see that as sort of peace building and spreading, interconnectedness at a larger scale. So thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. I would just like to get back to Ugo for the final question, and need to apologize also on behalf of the entire team that's behind the scenes today. We're probably not going to have time to cover all of your questions, and we do want to take a minute to do a final interactive exercise towards the end of the session. So that's unfortunately going to be the last one, maybe a final contribution in the end. But yeah, Ugo, there's this final question for you about how local actors interact among one another. How are they connecting with local institutional actors from different localities to do collective learning? Can you tell us a bit more about this? I think we've unfortunately lost Ugo. Well, he said in the beginning, internet was probably going to be an issue on his side. But then we can welcome Mariam Lopez. She would like to tell us a bit more about, to do a bit of a wrap up about all of the various ideas we've been discussing today around settlement-based approaches and localization. So Miriam, I'm happy to give you the floor for a final wrap up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. There are several aspects around localization, and we have several natural touch points or entry points between settlement-based approach and our attainment of localization. Working with multiple stakeholders is one of the 4 characteristics of the settlement-based approach. The civil society, the local, national government, local development actors, the market, and private sectors. The principle goes beyond a mapping exercise, and we are moving along the pyramid of participation from informing to consultation towards a partnership and towards empowerment and delegation. The cases studies in these sections are a testimony that this can be done, and this is how it can be done. And we should see more integrated, localized programming whenever the preconditions of where the settlement-based approach is adequate. These are the conditions that very much Maha mentioned when she was responding to you in how or why NRC decide to develop into this model. The Urban Settlement Working Group has done an excellent job articulating these preconditions in the guidelines, so please don't skip them. And I also want to mention a second pillar or core characteristics of the settlement-based approach is to consider the whole populations, residents, migrants, displaced people, refugees, returnees, hosts. This is perhaps the determining factors. As we know, the inclusion of marginalized groups is all the more challenging in situations of armed conflict or when displacement is across international borders. Local authorities have housing and settlements constantly at the top of the local agenda. We must ensure that displaced, affected people are not left out. It is because we recognize the right to adequate housing during displacement and upon return that the decisions we make need to be based on who can reach and deliver principal assistance based on humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. So I found these discussions very interesting. These are continuing. And I hope that we are part of these discussions. One keyword that very much resonates with me, that this approach must be intentional. I love the word intentional. I love the word accompaniment, and this is what we're discussing today. So thank you very much. Over.
Thanks a lot, Miriam, for this closing word. I think you summed it all up. And that's a great way to just go towards the end of this session. But before we call it a day and bring it to a close, there's a final thing I'd like to ask you. Is to take this final survey on Menti. It's the same code and the same page that you saw in the beginning. And we want to pick your brain about basically the main priorities and gaps that you see in your own position to further develop the settlements approach. So our working group, the Urban Settlement Working Group, has been on top of developing guidance over the past few years, but we feel that more needs to be done to make this approach available and viable for implementing partners. We're a pretty small team, to be honest, so we cannot cover everything at the same time. We need to focus our efforts on the things that matter the most for you, that will be the most useful for you. So by taking this survey, you're also helping us to identify these efforts, because we're very much wanting to support you guys in your own work at the local level and as well at the global advocacy level. So I'm hoping you can log in this Menti, the menti.com, and use the code, and I will give the floor to Tulio for this survey and goodbyes. Thank you so much again for joining.
Hi everyone again. Let's see if we can get the results. I'm also testing it now because we have, as you saw before, we had some issues with showing the results on the screen. But anyway, if you are not able to see it, we will be able to see it. But here we go.
You can see it.
Okay. So. Basically, the big question is what we need to start implementing the settlements approach. And I think one of the things that is recurrent is the donors, no? The donors to be able to do funding for multi-year, for multi-sector. And I think one of the things that we saw across, and that's kind of hinted in one of the messages on the right, is that we need to collaborate with the local actors and municipalities and local governments. So there's a path for ownership and sustainability. And I saw that Mario Flores from Habitat mentioned it in the chat, because that does make sure that there's, the time and the skills are embedded into the, a medium to long-term process. Again, there's something about land and access expertise as related to the HLP issues. And one of the things that Brett mentioned in the chat, and I'm not sure if Miguel or Pablo are available there. I didn't see it very well because I was sharing the screen. But something about the availability of 2 HLP advisors, and actually that's supported by DHA through the Global Shelter Cluster. So that's a good thing. I don't know if I cannot see if Miguel or Pablo are online, if they want to add one more line on this. Then let me see. Stuff that are coordinated. Another thing is our integration with existing coordinating bodies, and I think that's something we are doing as part of the Global Shelter Cluster, no? And how we drive this coordination with other sectors, with a Global Cluster Coordinations Group. So it's happening at different levels. Let's see. I think what I see here is something about the commitment of all clusters, and that's, I think that's something that it's been it's a work in progress, no? Especially because everyone has their attention. Each one has our attention in different things, and sometimes it's hard to sit together and decide, all right, let's actually do this. Because we're in the middle of a project, of showing results, of getting things done. So it is a work in progress, but it is happening. And I think the conversation is being taken by multiple actors. As you will see in the guidance, there's a contribution 50 experts, no, or from 50 people, no, that work in the field. So that is a sign that from different clusters, from different sectors, we want to actually collaborate. All right, we can say so many different things. I think we are going to map this out and use it for like as a feedback to us as Urban Settlement Working Group, and continue to integrate with the global initiatives. And I think now it's time for tea, coffee, tea, and snacks, as it says. I'm moving on here. Let's see. I think we want to wrap it up with a final message that this is an opportunity to bring different layers of stakeholders, local, national, and international, to actually localize and deliver more comprehensive assistance within the settlements and within the areas that we work. So from us, that is the final message. And we invite you to access the guidance. I think the link was shared on the chat, and to share with us any feedback. We took note of some remarks and contributions and requests in the chat, and we make sure that we take them with us. Thanks so much for joining this session, and excuse us for the minor technical issues, but we hope you have a very good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks also, and congratulations to our panelists who managed to make it despite technical issues on their side. We're very grateful that you committed to it.